근데 아마 다 남부터 처음으로야. 아니 다 공도 딜리스 치료 딜리 쉬하다 잡지도. 근데 다 다난디 소보디 다 가서들인데 다 참을 된 소매아디 까마베다 고게 뒤제 다 딜리지 체던 소매아래 드린두산 당에 다나 숍에 아니 다 모두 비즈 셔나시 다 까마바데 지 가르쳐다 까마바세 첸디 토가 김젠디 아니 상계 탐지기 아니 차와 중계 상계 탐지기 job 사마로다 지 레가르 치게는디 딜리지래고 요아래 상계 탐지 첩체에서 말하면 아무리 지 상계 탐지기 칠레기 옹호암 다 칠레 존재를 차리요아래 제가 니지 상계 탐지기 칠레디 자와데 과토도 알았잖아. 아니 닌질도도 알았어. 니지 첨부들이야 도도 알아. 제가 닌지 첨부 사변의 준토부 정원입니다. 사변 텔레 댄세 엔다가다 셈베 칠레기 다가들 가져에 로도 사마로다 게트웨어를 듣는 용이 알아. 다들이 뉴스하는 자와데 네 다나 쉬는신 자외 아주 유아 땅다마다서 자외 군농을 도도 알았어 아니 군농데 신지서를 좀 고로 봐 다디 신지서디 아니 니지 첨벌이야 신진고 신샘 신지서 신샘 베스 맞아
Good afternoon, everyone. And along with wishing you good afternoon, we are continuing our discussion of this commemoration of the 900-year anniversary of the lineage of Karmapas. And as I said this morning, the root of all of the activities of the Karmapas is great compassion. So the basic meaning of who the Karmapa is as a figure in the lineage or in the realm of the Buddha Dharma, then we can say that the Karmapa is considered to be the one who accomplishes all of the activities of all Buddhas. We can say that Karmapa is the one who does the job of all of the Buddhas, the one who represents all Buddhas, or the one who embodies or symbolizes the enlightened activity of all Buddhas. And the root of all of this is great compassion. By planting the seed of great compassion, we can come to enjoy the great harvest of benefit to others. And as we discussed earlier, if we work on the basic process of transforming our motivation, bringing a change to our basic motivation, then this is how we begin.
다 가능스럽지. 자외 차네 다 점에 현디야 다디 가르쳐해. 자외 차네 가르쳐다. 금센산라도 knowledge,
맞아.
the reason, the philosophy maybe. 다디 상매지 시에디요래 데 이내야 딱 응어수다 가수디 이제 라렌 따지 수 니머지 미지나로리아 라렌 따데 디스칼라 하브르 차디도와
Lasso.
얘들을 제서 빼나 아니 some this seems to be this world is not so welcome
Lasso.
the garsa misang this the welcome time average
Misambolanza.
so it looks like
No.
the world is not welcome good heart someone like
Lasso.
good human being
Mm-hmm.
제 제비네 아니 저번에 이탈리아 오늘지 미삼바 상부 미상부디 권부체 다 미디스 가르 텔레 도버르디 망부르 샤용 거봐
Lasso.
데니 두산에 미뉴뉴지 미 삼바 상부 뉴뉴지 미 따디스 가르 텔레 도버르 지기 kuyu narolea dego dusan ta kalero chwa tis karwede difficult ndo ji chodea ro yongro ba ta ina da de mangbuji yarta ta 간다야 dine dusan ni ji sa di da ji karwede kana shebne ji la len de dusan le la ba chi min bro chi de ngarang de chodo 근데 나는 안 사면래 라바도 나를 진디스 자가를 진고래 가르사나 디스 가르베다지 라마르체 디 쿠유데 지 추에 쿠유운다 다 섭다르들이야 other looks like looks
Lasso.
다디 야시 야타 뭐 말이네야 디 추기 쿠유운다 지 나올래야 대유스요 아들 인도스탄에 나란래 나더블라 다 추냐면 제알 집은 니지 전주섬 이야기해요 알 강엔들이 책에 예비나 아니 신다 기라서 상으로 아니 지 둔지 롱저 둔지 첨보 안다나시 차와 차보 안다나시 녀도 차보 된제기 구유지 나로리아 데두산에 대외 강에 첨보에 버려 소 시브레 성도 딩이야 하고도
Lasso.
understandable
Lasso.
또 이내당 아주 teacher들이 레가다 가라서는 양이 repeat 전에
Lasso.
다디 계정보래 아니 다나시 자침보래 제제 디 가서다 value somewhere 다디만 저시 야와데 아주 랭게르 시도와
Lasso.
인도산에 지진당 아주 닌지당 닌지 골드시야나
Lasso. Of course, everyone can understand loving kindness and compassion from the perspective of knowledge or reason or philosophy. But as we mentioned earlier, it is very difficult to directly and tangibly put loving kindness and compassion into practice in our daily lives. Furthermore, sometimes it seems that this world is not very welcoming to good people. It seems sometimes that the world is not very welcoming to people who simply want to have a good heart and do good things. It seems sometimes rather that the world is more accommodating to the opposite type of person, and that in fact that type of person is greater in number than those who simply wish to have a good heart, want to develop more positive intentions and actions. And so I know how difficult it can be for people who seem often to be in the minority in wanting to have a good heart and perform positive actions, to actually practice that type of path successfully in this world. And I especially know that to be the case for all of you who are out in the real world, so to speak, as opposed to being inside a completely dharmic environment. So spiritual teachers such as myself get to live most of our day-to-day lives within an environment that is more or less a dharmic environment. Of course, we can't succeed in 100% in making it a dharmic environment, but at least it looks like one, and it has the rough shape of a dharmic environment. And even within that context, it's difficult to really practice loving kindness and compassion genuinely on a day-to-day basis. Therefore, please know that I understand that it is even more difficult for you all to practice loving kindness and compassion genuinely on a day-to-day basis due to the challenges in your environment. Challenges like busyness, disputes, and complications of all sorts that go with being out in the day-to-day world. Nevertheless, the job of spiritual teachers is to always repeat things, offer reminders about what is the most important, what qualities are the most precious ones to cultivate. So in that kind of spirit, I thought it would be good to talk a little bit about compassion this afternoon.
세상 시제 찬도 가서 미상으로 당별 찬데 통만이네 미도자를 같이 찍어 얘기 말다.
Lasso?
또디 미상으로 어느지 가서 미수 통이네 나 야보지 통나 삼바는 나나 야보지 통양은 돼 봐요 아래. 나는지 미수 대비 가서다 미수를 지기네야 나랑 가서다 그버차로 근데 지금 미지 차 저와요 아래. 마도 당분이네 나 미수 통이네 단 전자버지 통하게 저와버지 기억 많아요.
Lasso?
따이네 쿠유당 다나시 안지 콘배왕做的 콘배왕 얘기를 kum시
Lasso?
콘배왕라 되네 근데 진배 에 가서 나주 빈준 버룰이야 아니 해봐 첨부 성말을 big difference
Lasso?
따들이야 배는 지금 아주 지금 주로 가가르부터 지금 나눠려야 고유 나눠 균중보 대비나 양 아주려야 디 desire strong the desires and the difference of religious 봐
Lasso?
내가 배는 남배나게 남배 고유지는 상황 좀체 애는 코르지 엔터베너지 이슈인다고 하나 가지를 드리지 고유나 상황 좀 주스다네 안 디기 고라야디 상황 좀디 검식 왕기 and big different 통하지
Lasso?
안 다나지 culture 지쇼민저 나로야 상황 좀 되네야 빈수 개발심 보통 대하지 안 다나지 다 참모 셰비네 this personal summary
Lasso?
미겔 소소이네야 야 빈수 디스 가셔야지 시가당 다나지 따웨 캐소당 진짜겠다 공반 민저왕기 에너지 능미직 나눠리냐 ben 능미직 나눠 one family 나눠리냐 that is 시가다 계속 야 개발치 뭐 요돼 그렇지 다 되게 상으로 당분이네 근데 가셔야 돼 개발치 뭐 되지 여배체네 영어 말해 당부 아니 simple 상물로 지고 임바 가르쳐다지 야와시라면 돼봐 정신 용부 임바 되네 정신 만용바 아니 정신 가서 만제버로 근데 차로
Lasso?
근데 인주산에 야다 대만 디시에
Lasso? From the fundamental perspective of what makes us human, or what constitutes us as human beings, there really aren't any bad people in terms of our primordial nature, or in terms of the way we were, so to speak, in the beginning. If you were to go around and ask people how they wanted to be perceived by others, I think we would all find that all of us want to be perceived in a good light by other people. No one harbors the wish to be seen as a demon by others in terms of a natural inclination. But differences come about in the character and demeanors of people due to what kind of habits we develop. And this differentiation on the basis of habit is a principle that shows up across a broad array of different spectrums of human development. We have religious differences, for example, that come about due to habits we form through being in different religious environments. I may have grown up in a Buddhist environment, and because of that, taken on different habits that affect what type of a person I am, how I behave as a person. Someone else might have grown up in a Christian environment, and that affects what type of habits they develop and what kind of demeanors they develop. So even on that level, differences arise between different groups of people. The same goes with culture and cultural differences between people, and you can even take it to a more subtle level by examining even one family and seeing how there are differences between each of the members of that family, even within the same group, based on different habits that they have come to develop for whatever reason and due to whatever conditions that were present for them. In this way, due to different habits piling on top of each other, there comes to be a lot of differences between individual people and between groups of people. But in the very beginning, there are no such differences. In the very beginning, all of us are simple people with no boundaries between us. But what happens over time and through the development of habit is that what was once a completely equal plane becomes unequal. What was once a completely shared and universal experience becomes a field of experience where there are distinctions and where there is no longer this shared quality.
제가 콘배 와나 되네. 엔 빈주 양타를 묻지마.
맞아?
시 정신 시 와도 세베나. 엔 빈주 타니가 인데와. 드린주산 당 아주 지금 최ኛ면 지도산에 아니 지 콘배 와나 되네 지 가수에다 지 개바친데바 지 디디들이야 아주 지 가수에 다 많이 dro다 샤버지 봐.
맞아?
다 dro다 바사들에 지 벽에를 dro다 바사들에 지시를 하고 야도.
맞아?
베르 지도 와.
맞아?
dro다 바사도 뉴말이야 베는 아주 뭐마디 다.
맞아?
다다 쉬바 달라.
맞아?
다 바타를 뭐 줘야 제도 꼴이야. dro지 다시로.
맞아?
당번에 뉴마들 다다 뉴마를 징기로 봐.
맞아?
될 당번에 dro다 여말 봐.
맞아?
다들 dro지 다샤로 봐.
나.
다나 생 아주 당번이네. 아니 지 딘 가서 뭐 니스 돌던데 이메비네야. 다들랑 아주 지 남도 파 가서 지 쇠체 아니들이야 가서 지 개발 첨부지 아주 군딱배 관에다 쇠샤부지.
맞아.
다들이 루산에 다당 아주 잠인지시에 루산에 미상으로 드르기 남도 조다베 지 개발선에 장도
Kepa.
개발
Oh, kepa. Oh,
different
that's all.
야나 지 건배와나 되는 중요하게 아니 개발 기술을 봐 세체 아 상물로 정신 시라 나는 아 미서 미임 버지고 임바 다나신 초와 디두 여바 지고 임바 다나신 동해 전도 대화 된도 여바 지고 임바 나 니도 사단도나 아 상물로 정신 지임베기 다 니루로 디토리아 셈드 수 로토도지 셈 낭라 김을 로고나시 디토리아 수 로토
That's all.
다 디과르디 계속 제샤 데로 투고레 로 미투버지 말해 빼나 빼차샤위미나 빼나 가르지 충두이네 치예리아 베나 아메리칸도지리아 살롱 충두이나가
That's all.
근데 아메리게 다와다 아메리게 때 가르쳐야지 배 인지 액센다 다들 정말 겨러 봐
That's all.
지단서 배발해 이내야 어느 살롱 충분히 권배왕하는 데네 아메리카 차로로 봐
That's all.
계시 당번에 고라 정신 눈두기다 가르쳐야지 배발하지 다음에 정신 눈두고 배발하지나 아메리카 충분히 아메리카 대비네 건 유구 말아 봐
Lao.
얘네들 윤조도 윤전 가라서나 다주 콤바당 고요당 콤바당 다 딘제가 토하네 윤조야 하네 제자다디 콤디 가르쳐다 그런 콤배왕의 규칙들마다 정신시계 엔데 준조부 수도 매번 인상 다디 유와 당토버지 이 말이야
You're done too much. That's all. Tene rangshin hundred ki pebayena tene arila pona yang kurang gyurgi mares. That's all. Oh, that's all. Kaisina di kurang ki rangshin.
Yeah, yes.
That's all. So due to the development of habit and layers of habit forming on top of one another, we move from a place of togetherness and freedom from separation to a place where we're farther and farther away from each other. So the result of our habits is to make ourselves distant from each other, but the true character of our nature is that we are close to each other. And this is a very important point for Dharma practitioners to bear in mind, because really the essence of all of the Dharma practice that we do is to remove our projections, our superimpositions, the imputations that we make upon reality, so that we can return to a connection with our natural state in which there is no separation between us and sentient beings, in which we are once again close in our own true nature to all other sentient beings. But to get to that place, we have to remove these projections of thought, these superimpositions or imputations of thought. And the word in Tibetan that can be translated as either superimposition or projection or imputation is dota. It has a nice explanation to it in Tibetan. Do means feather, tak means to apply or stick. And so the notion is that if you have a bamboo arrow, then in order for that arrow to travel a long distance, then you need to attach a feather to it so that it can go a long way away. So in the same way, when our mind engages its habit of excessive labeling of things and projections and superimpositions and imputations, then it creates the effect of distancing ourselves from others and creating lots of distinctions and separations. But the objective of the Dharma is to be able to to remove these superimpositions that were created by our thoughts and concepts and return to our natural ground in the manner of coming home. Coming home to one's original abode. And this is the practice of loving kindness and compassion, to work with our habits in this way. Tibetan term, doda. Oh, sorry, yes. Where did that go? Oh, sorry. I forgot to translate the other side of the sheet of paper. So, in addition to that, we recall that in our own true nature, we are all the same. In terms of our desire to enjoy happiness and our desire not to suffer, we are all the same. That is our true character. That is the true nature of mind to which we return in the manner of coming home. And it's important to know that it is possible to make this return. There's nothing impossible about making this return home to our true nature in which there are no separations and in which there is no distance between ourselves and others. If a Tibetan person, for example, if I were to have been born in the United States, then due to growing up in the United States, I would come to adopt what would be called American-type views, American accents in the way that I speak, and so forth. Because even though I'm Tibetan, my habits would have been American. But if someone who is naturally Tibetan, through having grown up in Tibet, comes to the United States, even though they're in an American environment, their views and their demeanors, their way of speaking, and so forth will not change because their nature
No.
is... Okay.
No. How to say it?
Okay. All things which... Lasso. Oh, if there were. Oh. Okay, so just a little slight adjustment of words there. If there were such a thing as a truly existent Tibetan person, then they would be able to come to the United States or, grow up in the United States, and their habits, their thoughts, their accent, all of that would be the same. It would be, straight up Tibetan. But we know that there is no such thing, because people develop in this way only in dependence on what habits they cultivate. There's no such thing as a solidly existent preset attitude and accent and everything that you enter into and then stay that way for the rest of your life, because all of this is just an accumulation of habits, and it's all changeable. So for that reason, it is eminently possible for us to return to our home of mind, our true nature, in which there is no separation.
ngārab sēne dēpē kārshwē tā rāngshīn kārī mēdiliyā ngō nī sūgī tā rāngshīn real-situation dī tōliyā chū lō jē kā nāndu kōr sēne tā tō sēm kā chū chō nē sāma tā dī tsāmsa pēmbar jēng dōs
That's all?
가라서 삼성 아주 양지 미다 미버르지 so big difference and then 다는 조다 마음 chen du san and then ji 아주 직자다 then 다는 신 이미 제바다 반지 가서 이체매다 and 다는 신 낭습다 마음 지원이 도와
맞어?
또 이내人性 삼단도 상 아주 미에 지부체 and dido 그 소화이 뭐 지버지 인도산 and 대라 저 삼다 인도산 this 르르르 차도
맞어?
이 인도산 아주 아 상으로지 미드 미버를해야지 다다방 아주 메저를 제제 지 개발을 정아 수수양 미신다 미드지 개발이 와지 가서 this 개발 this 요 저번 계급 여러다
맞어?
계급 빈수이네래 안다나 신변 지소 빈수이네래 미 빈수이네래 정로 the separate child but 현대 민자와지 요아체도 가서 매주체리고
맞어?
다변은 미 개발질 참이나 나디스 즉 추보르지 요아체도 미신다도 민자와 대중이 망하르지다 아니 야나지 칸바 망하르지 안다나시 소자 망고 예데르지 근데 요아체도 아주 매주를 체대요래 또 있는 아주 조다 매주체 안다나시 인생 콜무유도 왜 자와 차버지 같이 침비네 아주人性的 지거지 봐人性的 교당도 말아
맞어?
아주 미임의 지거체 니도 그 소화임의 지거체 되는 뉴스안에 단 너나 to the end we are human being
맞어?
대만도 좋어요 말해 제가 들량 아주 지금 삼로 시다인 뉴스안 참사 르르지용도 내용만 이제 라바 총소 디안가 시에네 제바스게임도 아주 변이수 배운 뉴스안에 안 라가라디 다 자나가 가르지 자나 police 토그레 삼시 시나서 쉬죠
맞어?
안다 수십체 디두산 자나 police 사디 삼려나 코리온 뉴스한테 police 디 미망이 버르지
맞어?
시나사고 that is million 데버르지 다 시나사버지다 미임베 초아시라면 이제 police 시스템 다지 sort of very powerful, very scary. 가서다 very 다 감다. 근데 좀 지삼을 거용 거 봐.
맞어?
다들 삼는 거용 뉴스안에 디 가두 태연한테 나라 처처치.
맞어?
시나사서. 다마르 뉴스안에 게 로봇 소리 게 고소리야. 게 로봇 스케치. 다 플리즈 사나 미러 왔다. 근데 뉴스안 다 시라랑 시하고 말았어. 미러 왔어.
맞어?
뉴스안에 미드 미투고요 마도 지기 미드 제투고요 말데 뉴스안 시대랑 시나차고 말았어.
맞어?
시야를 줘서. 저 디소제 삼성 아주지 big difference 안다나시 big 가르쳐야다시 디 high and low somewhere 토와다 마와다 안다 가르쳐지 근데 개발시다 용돼야돼 삼 답대로 스tam이나 人性到底什么当面呢？这是那这长毛了脸拉不长出来的是多。我刚来哈不得被鸟子长忙不起，学不起也比呢，什么冬天季节长毛了都得不说出来的去，养的多，人就啥呢？但这个样子是那么远呢啊做，但人性啥的样，差不多这个东北你的大面吧的，这来呀广州的，这让没钱。 다가 아주 베이직 아주 지 시제상 아주 로미 뭐 집어인 바다 다나신 디도부서와 예배 집어인 바 또 드레지 니루 드레지를 아주 양내 양도 지금 아주 삼동 토벌을 주는 야보면서
맞어? So I think that if we can cultivate this ability to return to our basic nature again and again as students of the Dharma, there will be great benefit in doing this. Through the development of habit, we come to superimpose lots of big differences between people. And as those differences grow and grow, as the appearance of those differences grows and grows, then we come to feel more fear, we come to have less trust in each other, and we fall under the sway of the way things seem to be rather than the way things are. So rather than getting completely caught up in that way of looking at things, we can recall our more basic nature of being the same in terms of our basic experience of happiness and suffering. If we can think that way, then I think it'll make us more relaxed. Of course, we have this great tendency in the world, both as individuals and as groups, such as countries, to actually put a lot of effort into making ourselves seem different from others. In terms of people, we compete with each other to see who's going to become the wealthiest, to see who will have the most houses, and so forth. In terms of countries, we compete with each other to see who has the most economic development, the most factories, and things like that. And we actually put a lot of effort into seeming separate and seeming like there's a big difference between us and others. But those are all just superimpositions. They're all projections of our concepts and thoughts. Even if we engage in those efforts to make ourselves seem to be different from others, no matter how much effort we apply, we still can't change our basic nature. We still can't change the fact that we're all the same as human beings. And as His Holiness said, to the end, we are human beings. We can't do anything about that. And there's a story that I have shared before that I think would be good to share again about when I was escaping Tibet. Of course, when I was escaping to get Tibet, there was a great fear that we would have to encounter the Chinese police. And every time we would think of an image of Chinese police, we would become more and more terrified. And we made this big projection in our mind of Chinese police up to the point where we didn't even see them as human anymore. They were some kind of non-human demonic entity that was really terrifying, scary, powerful, and so forth. And the more we invested ourselves in this way of thinking, the greater our anxiety and fear grew. So eventually, I came to kind of see this pattern more clearly, and so I said to one of the people I was with, police are just humans. It's not, if we encounter police, it's not going to be a case of a human encountering a ghost. It's going to be a case of a human encountering another human. And we should remember that, and there's no real reason for us to be scared. That's all.
Finished? Okay. 앞에서 들려는 진술. 다 간다야. 做的아주 지금 남배 송대야. 니지 첨부. 심지어 머리가 탐지할이야. 근데 니지 공부를 했어. 다 탐지. 또 니지 스두사네. ane khonsu di dunghe le deche mandebe dunghe re mandebe dunghe tele dönche ane ndebe dewa pusum choba tartuba yangya dunghe nyoa meba da diliji komang le ya kugi yinya barchi da diliji sim ning thakbane da diliji 참이나 니 타버들 지치야데 니 지스고 봐 맞아 근데 따이네 심진 탐지 니지 검스 두사나 당만 이제 라브는 신에다 심진 리신도 베 니지 검 심지어 레신도래 에너지 가서 아주 리리 신도 전에 에너지 가서 때 인지 거야다 심해 주야사디 다다 남상 아주 용도 가라 하래.
나서
다이네 지당 아주 지 셈젠사의 지 셈스두산 셈젠스두산 셈다 데마스 거봐. 셈다 데마스두산 셈데 지 초와예바. 다 디도 초와예 그렇지. 디도 초와예 인주사 디도 그 초와예바. 셈제 지 이내 송데 되게 들량 아주 고술이야. 네. 가서 컨선 정말 고술이야 심고르체. 아니 고술이야 아주 에너지 구십체네. 딱 한다. 니도 그 초아 예배대 아주 물련체. 니도 그 초아 예배 인자 안데 대화다. 제 강도체. 동해단 제일 강도체. 나 너네 자지 지금 인사로 그러지. 시제 찬 소술이야. 삼들의 예배 이미나. 다당 오여수 심지어 탐지에 뒤지도 편도 좀부터 이미냐. 시제 찬 다외 캐셔다. 삼 동시로 근데 예배 이미나. 심지어 근저지 토가 이네야. 단 너나 심지어 근저지의 차가 이네야. 될래야 소수 정신이 이 가져다 대화 주야다 동에 봉야기 배주치로 와.
라서
시제 찬다와 기술을 충분히나. 다 뒤에서 지면자. 근데 두상 아주 남균에 안 정로 가져에 근데 저기 셈여도 좋아야 아니 수수 더주 진리를 줄 거야 돼 계속시다.
라서 the highest expression of a compassionate motivation and the essence of cultivating or meditating upon great compassion is that we cultivate the wish to establish sentient beings without exception in the highest, most genuine state of happiness. The state of happiness that is perfectly abundant. The state of happiness that sentient beings will never have to again fall from or part from. The state of happiness in which they will never again return to suffering. So that is the kind of pinnacle motivation that we try to bring to bear while cultivating and meditating upon compassion. But it's important to remember that when we say that we want to establish all sentient beings in a state of happiness, that sentient being simply indicates beings who have minds, beings who have a heart, beings who have this basic experience of happiness and suffering just like we do. So as soon as someone has a mind, from that moment onward, they basically have the same types of experiences that we do in terms of wanting to be happy, not wanting to suffer. So this is the way in which we connect with a heart of concern or care and respect for the experience of all sentient beings or any of the sentient beings that we encounter. And so if we try to give rise in our heart as much as possible to the desire to give sentient beings this perfectly abundant form of happiness and to free sentient beings from suffering as much as we can, then we might not actually have the chance to make that wish a reality when we encounter sentient beings, but due to the habit that we have cultivated of desiring to establish beings in happiness, desiring sentient beings to be free from suffering, then when we do encounter sentient beings, we will naturally enter into some type of effort to bring about their benefit. No matter what circumstances that we meet these beings under, then there will be some natural presence and momentum of effort there, whereby we can endeavor to connect beings with happiness and free them from suffering. So I think that this understanding of what a sentient being is, anyone who has a mind, anyone who has this basic experience of happiness and suffering, is something to remember again and again in our day-to-day practice.
야, 다 망부지, 다 망부시엔데, 지금 confusion,
right? No.
The confusing.
It would be confusing.
Yeah, confusing. 자, 인가야래.
Lesson.
제장, 망부시에 망어제.
Lesson.
之前当我上了没上不起当，那先片中间级前头上不了了的，上不了的，但现在这当我做刚业的没上不起肯定是巧的，先片中间级肯定是巧的，前当记录马线，第是刚业的巧的。
Lesson.
但现在第刚业是他们多，大本来就推送看不到，啊，他推送看不到，全世界人。
Lesson.
미 상에 뒤숨게 받는 시 채워를 쓰요 만에
Lesson.
다나지 밀레레버를 비치는 또 밀레레버데 천시에 지래 다가는 시 기부 담바 망부지人이기 구시 실비 나눠려야 참니지의 전수기 쓴다 현평이 냠년디수 나네 아니 코랑 그 남달 차상 담아 있어도 안 소리야 되나요 아래 드리 뉴스안에 딱 고수장 아주 example 미상보지 근데 채워라스나 미상보지 지루 제다 아니 마시에는 알을 뜨스 내 남다를 뜨스
Lesson.
딱 한다 남다를 담아기 수도 마 나요 아래 드리 뉴스안에 딱 아주 인지 민지 코라주 근데 제비나 다가난신 배배슈시 가서 다변에 배는 아주 진짜 이게 지두스안에
Lesson.
아무도 뒤에 뒤에 갈라 하트 유시
하고성 베이. Lao.
뒤에는 제과스 개민도 와
Lesson.
다 당부 정규산에다 뒤간 집배를 쉬시 이제 어디 이게 샤 개개인이 이게 샤 뒤간을 쉬우치야 이제 저로 와
Lao.
다 제마지 소소를 라왕 탑에 걸려야 인지미지 이게 과야면도 와 소소 라왕기 관에 이게 지지 소소 스타일
Lao.
소소 규모에 개조해야 돼 봐. 근데 지금도 이게 지지 저거 오르마도 그 뒤에 배경에 쉬는 거는 갈아가버려 봐.
Lesson.
근데 인도스탄에 다디 example 들으시래. example 인지미 자상을 넣어 가지고 배쉬인 나가는 시체하고 쓰고 아마네. 양 가시 근데 양 3등 있어요.
Lesson.
그 밀레레바스라다 남산 밀레레바는 시지 제권하러 샤체 엔 남산지 돌아와서 가르쳐지.
Lesson.
아니 제거를 그 아니 다들 요하면 돼.
Lesson.
갈아가.
Lesson.
딱 강다리야. 코란주 기부 탐반 넘버스 현다 민대에 투무 모임바지 영화도 가르랬잖아. 단기 되나 시래 양자를 리주 다 알아요. 아주 등산 전문이 털려야 베네지 consumerism somewhere. 다들 이제 미강걸로 consumer데 and religious chart. 21st century. 델리아 be 이체체. 아니 미주 가르치게 되는 다나시 수수체. 너도 좀 저디야. 근데 매비지 수수인지 미신나 가르치면 뒤 제고 왔게요만. 수수지 규모 매비. 랑과 상보지 당과 수수체체.
Lesson.
근데 이제 토는 저도 정의미나. 아니 신의지 규모 매비지. 현다 규모 매비지 남다르서야지 연구를 봐.
Lesson.
현다 규모도 신에 아다 다들 가라 가보시. 네 비슷하네. 기부 담보 공마 아니 지기 다다 루규 털이야 돼 봐. 아니 다다 초신시야 돼 봐. 다들 이들이 아주지 배다스를 제거해야 돼. 개념을 해.
Lesson.
딱 간다 너는 지 개회신이 있어야 돼. 다 배다스를 제거. 빼다스를 마도 뽕부 만다.
Lasso.
내 참소로 가시 삼을지 계획신이다 라마스 두산지 뽕부르지 아 소소 요부르지 안 디기 야르다 대림들지 뽕부엔 까다 요부엔 디카는 예사르죠.
Lasso.
근데는 말해 되니까 빼다스럽지. 진짜 빼야겠다고 하다 계속 그러셔.
Lasso. So there's not a great need for me to say too much more about compassion, because if I spoke for too much longer about the subject, it would become confusing, or if I said too much about it, it would become confusing. Basically, in essence, all of us want to be good people. We all want to accomplish the benefit of others. Sometimes the trick is with the question, how do I do that? What do I do to be a good person? How do I go about benefiting others? That can be tricky, but it's not too tricky, because fortunately we have wonderful examples to help guide us in this endeavor, in this vision of trying to accomplish our wish of being a good person. Dusum Kempa is one example of someone who wholeheartedly devoted his life to the benefit of others. Milarepa is another example of that type of person, but they're just examples. They're just symbols of what a true altruistic life can look like. Just because they led their lives in that way, and just because we're trying to emulate them in order to accomplish or develop these qualities of love and compassion, doesn't mean we have to do everything in the exact same way that they did. We're basically trying to cultivate our loving kindness, compassion, and altruism, and looking to them as an example of how to do that. So that's the most profound oral instruction or spiritual instruction that these masters can offer us, is their own life examples. Basically what they're saying to us is, if you want to know how to be a good person, if you want to know how to cultivate loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, look at my life story. And that's the most powerful instruction there can be. But at the same time, we don't need to copy their life story, detail for detail. It's not like we're taking their life story and laying it down on a table and then putting the paper of our life on top of that and trying to trace every single contour of the image that they laid before us. Tracing can be beneficial in the beginning, like if you're learning how to write letters properly, then you can rely on a good model that the teacher produced. But after you gain your own strength in writing letters, then you don't have to rely on the original model anymore. You don't have to trace what your teacher wrote. You can bring your own unique qualities to bear, develop your own style. So we should use the life examples of the genuine masters of the past to inspire us and to teach us about how to be a good person and practice compassion and bodhicitta, but we shouldn't think that we have to do everything in exactly the same way that they did it. So some people fall into this extreme of thinking in this way. They read the life story of Milarepa, and then they start thinking to themselves that they have to do everything just the way Milarepa did. So they proceed getting rid of their old clothes and buying cotton robes and so forth. But there's no sense at all in that we don't need to go to that extreme form of emulation or imitation. Also, another kind of dangerous form of emulation that we have in the modern world is consumerism, which has really become the religion of the 21st century. And if we get too caught up in this environment of consumerism, then we begin using that as the model that we're trying to trace after and imitate. But rather than doing that, we can turn to these inspiring examples of the life stories of the genuine masters of the past, such as Dusum Kempa or Milarepa. And then we'll be really laying the ground to bring some unique benefit ourselves to the world. Not only can we look to the life examples of masters of the past, but we can also look to the life examples of masters who are with us today. Because in any case of a spiritual teacher or guru, they are simply a model for us to look at. They are simply an example for us to emulate. They're not like a lord who rules over our every action and thought. It's not the case that the spiritual friend is there just to give us orders, and that our job is just to follow their orders and obey the whim of their every command. But rather, the spiritual friend is an example to inspire us so that we can emulate their qualities.
아야, 다 되네. 하자. 다 지단 전에 저하를 지 자연은 지 accept 제거할 수 없어도 돼. 이나자 저하 간지들래요.
Lasso.
I'm a little bit worried.
Lasso.
Very difficult question, or very, how to say, very,
No.
then I don't want to answer.
Lasso.
Maybe easy question,
Lasso.
then maybe true easy question, no need to answer.
Long. Lasso.
A little bit easy, a little bit difficult.
Long.
Yeah, it's okay.
Lasso. So the thought occurred to me that perhaps we could have a little bit of time this afternoon for some questions from the audience. However, I had reservations about this because if I opened up the floor to questions, I wouldn't want people to ask questions that were too difficult for me to answer, or questions that were too rabble-rousing, or not, that's not the right word, trouble-stirring. I don't want to field questions that are coming from an intention to stir up trouble, nor do I want to field questions that are just too difficult for anyone to answer. But at the same time, there's the other extreme of questions that are too easy. If you have a question that's too easy, then it's better not to ask it. So let's try to have some questions that are not too easy, not too hard, but right in the middle.
I think that 중앙아천 중이기다. 중앙아천. 딱 하나 드린 게 내 집에면 신규 내 향소리야. 렌뱀에 격규에서 가만다.
Lasso?
다 이내 가서 좋아하는 예시.
Lasso?
And just like a friend.
Lasso?
Just ask.
Lasso?
테마도 지금 내 뱀에 지내 격규 향소 마셔서 내 시규 정도 시시가 만다.
Lasso? So perhaps we can have 5 questions. And remember, I'm not offering this opportunity with the assumption that I have all kinds of answers for you, and that I have all kinds of dazzling responses to give to your questions. But rather, let's just approach this as 2 friends talking. If you have a question on your mind, I'll say what I can in response. But apart from that, I'm not holding the assumption that I have something earth-shaking to offer you. Okay, so the translator will choose the questions. How are we going to mic them? Is there a running mic? Or?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so remember your numbers, please. 1 with the purple, yes, you, yes. 2, you are 2, yep, 3, this woman with the glasses here. 4, this man drinking tea. And am I missing? Yes, 5. Okay, with the pink jacket. So number 1 was with the purple sweater back here.
Thank you so much, Rinpoche. So, should I just...
Yes.
My question is, I live in the USA, and where I live, everybody is so comfortable and pretty happy, I mean, compared to what I've seen here in India. And I'm afraid when I get back home, I will become complacent. It's so easy to become complacent where I live, where people are so comfortable, relatively speaking. So what is your advice to me to keep the urgency of the need to practice and to stay focused on spiritual path?
Tene gagala duna tene
Maro you can
arila
Nijiki jamna kanda. Nijiki atom nijiki jamna.
ola so. Oh yeah, so where I'm from in America, there's more comfort,
Okay.
and in India there's not as much comfort. But here I'm like inspired to practice the Dharma in this environment. But I'm afraid that when I return to the United States, that I'll lose my desire to practice the Dharma because of the comfort. That I'll get carried. That I'll get too comfortable. I'll just kind of forget about Dharma. So, what advice do you have that I can kind of stay with Dharma practice and not lose the edge of my Dharma practice due to comfortable environment?
Comfortable. 다들 나랑기 my own experience. That 참석 그냥 알아 지금 참석 comfortable로 용어로 받아. comfortable로 야만의 something is well done. right?
Lasso?
내가 야부 총체. It's easy going 사 그래.
Lasso?
근데 준비할 거야. 나는 그 그냥 삼로 내내를 당. That time, there's more like more serious. 가르사나 삼성 디지 소수 디 more serious 제가 유전디 지금 삼성 지금 가르쳐 되지 띵아 예계에 싫어 차 년가지 도와.
Lasso?
아다 야우에 왜 가라 야우 말에 가랑 게 준비 있어서 지금 아 예계 게 시제를 해서 초진에야 가수에 디에다 it's comfortable, nothing to be worried. Then you start to church and uncomfortable chuna and the church.
Lasso?
Uncomfortable chuna the church and the little things that sometimes do.
Lasso?
That in being a tea galia just something where the chick caressana. The comfortable yoadi, comfortable yoadi, 가수에지 규겐 나서버질이야 되는 총을 규겐 사고 나서버질 되는 총을 되네 주스안에 아니 되게 규겐 되게 아주 sort of we need to see sort of some sort of value.
Lasso?
그래서 there's not of city.
Lasso?
아주 지금 드블이야 롱저가 잠이 드블 comfortable 될 롱저가 잠이 we need to search, we need to look the cause and conditions.
Lasso?
Today you san teledenche yang azu ji ka shwe gyugen di gyudan gen da shi che yu san ne ene shin yang ko ka shwe di ka shwe ji zuomie gi chong ma yin ba tele ne zwa da ka shwe tunge mang bo ji zwa ba den chong yin yu san ne an de yang azu ji it's not easy thing. It's something like we need to 단도 무투이네. 배수 제거해야지 당. 아니 가수지 삼당과를 지전도 선서로 용면.
Lasso? Sometimes I feel comfortable too with the way my life is going. There are times when things...
Sometimes, yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
There are times when projects go well, where things were well done, and it seems like things were accomplished in an easy manner. So there are kind of seasons of life where things seem like they're going smoothly. But actually, that's the time where I make myself more serious about the Dharma, and I kind of put more emphasis on really being vigilant. And the reason for this is because if you do, as you mentioned, get carried away by comfort, then that can become a basis for pride. So there's a danger that you'll develop more arrogance, like thinking, oh, I'm really great because I have this great situation, or I was able to accomplish such and such. So there is that cause for vigilance when those comfortable situations arise. But on the other hand, there's nothing inherently to become worried about when you're in the midst of a comfortable situation. It doesn't have to be the case that we just practice the Dharma when we're uncomfortable and forget about the Dharma when we are comfortable. When we're comfortable, what we can do is remember that this comfortable situation arose through a wide variety of causes and conditions. And we should develop some appreciation that it's not easy for this comfortable situation to arise, but that it arose in dependence upon causes and conditions. It didn't just arise randomly or without any effort, that it also arose without effort. So we kind of keep our mind sharp by contemplating the causes and conditions that caused this comfort to arise. And I think that type of inquisitiveness and investigation into the causes and conditions of comfort can help us sustain our effort on the path. Okay, number 2.
His Holiness, my question is about prostration and compassion. And I remember
Frustration?
Prostration and compassion.
F?
Prostration.
F.
P.
Prostration, okay, P, okay.
When you taught on prostration during your teaching on the King of Aspirations, you mentioned that we also, when we do prostration to the Buddhas, to the Three Jewels and the Three Roots, we also have to have the feelings of compassion going out to all atoms and all beings, in the world. And you also said that we need to think of all the virtues of the sentient beings and not only the Buddhas. And I wonder if you can explain a little further, because I have some, not quite understand. Thank you.
Tene Chinyi Suda ki Dreshenam Kapsu. Tene Chaksewe Kapsu, Tene Semchen Sangma, Ten Chiktu Chaksegi Yapa. Lam Mikne, Tene Chaksego Yadang, Chaksit Dembatan Yadang, Dembatan Yadang, Tene Tetam de Masebe, Ani Sangegi Yenden Tenso Chamba Tam de Masebe, Semchengi Yenden Dangewa. Di Tengu Gidu Sung Yosares, Sung Songs Shugi, Ani Dedos Gedra Nanona.
Okay.
Semchen Akbar do Semchen Gigewala Tenguya, Semchen Gigewa Dang, Intentions of Tenguya, Gola.
Yes, sir. 다간다 다디 진이 쏟아매 걸을 시거로 봐. 인사를 가져와디. 군도 삼배 말함도.
Now,
다 전수 군도 삼배 말함도 야첨부 초강지 야강지를 지하디 개첨부를 지 귤강지를 지하디. 제가 안직 참상직 들려면 잡는데 망고 연디 요래. 배나 다다 심지한 탐지 냠도 다 가져와다지. 차체의 삼바를 봐. 안 참자야 랑게 류레 외지 심부 망고 요러다. Bacteria라고 말어.
Lasso? No.
Bacteria have some form?
Yes.
Maybe. The bacteria is 냠도 어느 배 차체의 삼바를 봐. 드제기 삼다로 드제 용디 요러. 딱 간다르지 가수에. 단 도나 차체의 거리야. 차체의 유대야. 에너지 신초래와 뭐임바 뒤초래와 뭐임바 단단한지 신감람 점 탐지기 상계다 신주자마 탐지에 봤어 뒤대야 안 뒤다다와 뭐임바 내가봐도 망바다 다 가수지 다다웨기 상계다 신주자마 탐지에 봤어
Lasso?
단 차차와 버르니까 안데 가수지 랑지 보면이바 랑기 천디 밤에 소르지 심지어 탐지에다 아야 되게 해야지. 다 되게 되게 ngāda 저버 처음엔 지 박테리아사 되게 ngāda 저버 삼성 용되게 그렇지.
Lasso.
그래서 박 가서디 루터 가시는 데 용돼.
Lasso.
류 심벌어서 되게 차서 매버체. 그봐.
Lasso.
다 대양 아니 양디지 가서 류디안 류 직원인 봐. 류 차와 통주망 뭐 주인.
Lasso.
다
Lasso.
차차라서 봐. 단 너는 차 세딩지 아니 왜 초망 거 좋아한다.
Lasso.
다 감들 지지하르지. 그거 야 간지를 초 간지를 귤 간지 지하르지도 와.
Lasso.
드린 주사 디균산 때네 엔드 제과시래. 다이는 등기들 confusion 되게 참여해서.
Lao.
지당 그 심진 개와 장으로 사디 아주 연락 준비 나네.
Lingoa.
제수이랑 그거.
Oh, lasso. Lasso. Lasso.
제수이랑 그거야. 아니 지 상계의 전주 삼바다. 나는 지 년도에 랑상계다. 난 나는 지 소소수기고 대다 탐지기 는 개와의 제수이랑 공부를 해서 돼. 니 카가지고. 지금도 찾아야지. 지금도
Lasso.
봐.
Lasso.
들리지.
Lasso. So with regard to the aspiration of Samantabhadra, as you know that this is a prayer that begins with the sevenfold practice, that begins with prostration and goes through the practices of making offerings and so forth, including rejoicing and dedicating the merit. And with regard to the practice of prostration or paying homage, it's common, or it's a common kind of visualization or contemplation to imagine that oneself is prostrating or paying homage along with all sentient beings. And this is done as a method to kind of make the power of one's merit of reciting the aspiration as vast as possible. Some sadhanas or some practice instructions instruct us to visualize ourselves and all of our mother and father sentient beings together with us prostrating. That increases the force of our merit. And not only that, sometimes that we are instructed to visualize all of the bacterias in all of the bodies of sentient beings and imagine that they're prostrating as well, so that our merit of our prostrations are increased infinitely. We imagine that the object of our prostration or the field of our prostration is all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. We imagine that the time of our prostration is that all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the past, present, and future are present as objects of our prostration. And then in terms of the prostrators, we imagine that this is ourselves and all sentient beings and all of the bacteria in our bodies. The bacteria in our bodies is one way of kind of enhancing this sense of radical multiplicity in terms of who is doing the prostration. So the instructions like that are found in some practice instructions connected to the aspiration of Samantabhadra. But I think there was some confusion in one of the points you raised in your question regarding recalling the virtues or merit or excellent qualities of ordinary sentient beings. This applies to a different branch of the prayer, which is the branch of rejoicing. So when we practice rejoicing, we rejoice in the qualities of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. We also rejoice in the qualities and efforts of the hearers and solitary realizers, or the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas. And we also rejoice in the merit and positive qualities of ordinary beings. So we bring the Buddha's qualities to mind, the Bodhisattva's qualities to mind, and so forth, but also ordinary beings' qualities and good fortune to mind. And we rejoice in all of that, but that's at the stage of rejoicing. So it was at a different section of the text that comment was made. Question, next question?
No.
No?
Number 3.
Number 3, question number 3.
Hello, Your Holiness Karmapa. As your lineage already 900 years, and you were recognized as the 17th Karmapa when you are young, so you have no chance to choose your own life. So if you have the chance to choose your own life again, would you like to be the 17th Karmapa as now, or what kind of life you would like to choose? So can you please explain a little bit what is the meaning of life? especially human being. Thank you.
Wow.
Wow.
So what is the meaning of life, especially of human beings?
This is sort of a difficult question.
If you could choose your own life, if you could go back and you weren't recognized as a 17th Karmapa and you had the freedom to choose, would you choose to be the 17th Karmapa or would you choose to be something else?
That time, I'm only 70 years old. I got to choose it. Choose
That's all? No.
got to choose it.
That's all?
choose
That's all. Well, when I was recognized as the Karmapa... Loving.
Oh wow.
Well, the problem is that when I was recognized as Karmapa, I was only 7, so I really didn't have an ability to choose. The only thing I knew how to do was play. And then when I gained the ability to choose, it was too late because there was no freedom of choice at that point. So I was caught between a rock and a hard place. When I could have chosen, I didn't have the ability to choose, and when I had the ability to choose, there was no choice there. So that's the situation.
ngarangi ha gumeda ngone jene 가르산 다 당분에 nga 당부 깨연드네 버지에다 상원을 처리 제시하게 소리
맞아.
근데 가르래 로살랑가르 차상을 처리 제시하게 소리
맞아.
다디 가르래 ngaram 미지데 지삼다 인도상 아주 되긴지 시거다 레라 강고 마도 요마르사지
맞아.
레라 강고네야
맞아.
그에서부터마다 교랑 당과치서 요마르사
맞아.
다디 미상물로도 인사만해 알티 버지 다라 인데베 수치 당분에 가르쳐지 저지를 자상하지 제상 나라에 간다 찾아요 기승 알 초이스를 지역이나 내 가르칠 싫어요 그런 게 잘 삼단신 네가 삼단 당뇨매 because I'm born with no choice then I don't know I can't imagine 다이네 the meaning of life.
So for me it was, my birth happened in kind of, you could say, intensely karmic circumstances, in the sense that basically from the time I was born onwards there was a very strong and strongly kind of constructed path laid out before me, and it was right there for me to go into. And there's a saying in Tibetan that you have to follow whatever karma lays out for you. And I don't think that's true to the same degree for all people, because in some people's situations they can kind of, tinker with the situation a little bit and not always have to follow what was previously arranged by karma. There's a little bit of room for movement, so it's not 100% predictated by karma. But my situation was different. Basically, I was recognized at 7 to be the Karmapa at a time when I couldn't choose. I didn't have any ability to choose. And then things just happened that way. So it was very kind of strongly kind of preset in that sense. And so in terms of what would I be if I wasn't the 17th Karmapa, that's really a hypothetical question that I've never entertained, because that possibility has never been there for me. So that's that question.
The meaning of life sade kalakhabshare nge latu marchi 소수마도 같이 미신다지 랍트야 깔아 하버래.
Lasso.
Real meaning of life 사대.
Lasso.
따이네 내지 meaning of life 컨디션 얘기를 라비나. 따지 저는 알 아이디어를 지게.
Lasso.
다 뒤경아서 meaning of life 스드사 life 스드사는 퍼지지 소수 수부르지. 그러지 봐.
Lasso.
수보다 네 예외도 세대하르지.
Lasso.
딱 간다 소수 거와치나 딜라지 예버지. 지 소수 다 간다 수수 루비딩도 하지 예외 소치. 또 근데 되는 아이는 생도 life 사디 sort of like a net somewhere
Lasso.
internet net
Lasso.
가서 net
Lasso.
강가로는 잡아차야지.
Lasso.
난 도나 가장 아주지 에 시제 차는 아주지 그다 sombre net 되버대야 뭐 시안한테 안 겐시안한테 아니 미신다 좋아하시는 때는 내대버지 마도베 수수 장왕 정축관에 현라 마도베 신진了마도베 랑지비 초토야지 매버래 디세버시 다나신 레인두상 아주상으로 인터커넥트 인터디펜던트 레인두산에 가서 이제 잡아 차려야지 제상 meaning of life 사대 life 사대 수수 루비딘의 삼선 니토야며 디 미신다지 간에 미신다질 때에야 신의 지 소수의 가르쳐다지 가르쳐다 베네 미진님 보러 렌토야. 근데 연구를 봐.
Lasso.
근데 인두산에 다 개치슈디 meaning of life 사디 녜신거 말데이냐 고라디 용 최다로도 바지 딘데를 치면서 성도
Lasso.
상을 자체서 붙여 안다나시 아니 life 사디 very don't think it's very narrow very 가르쳐다지 보수도 버르지만 임세 드리지 삼담이나 안신의 니에토 면로서 살았습니다.
Lasso. As to the meaning of life, this is a very difficult question, and I don't think I have the answer to that. I think the only true answer to the meaning of life can be articulated by oneself, to oneself. Apart from that, it's impossible for me to say what the meaning of life is objectively. And furthermore, it's very interesting when we consider what are we thinking about when we think life? Like when we say life, what does that mean? Most people think of life as this living body, this body that we possess with vital signs, and whatever's immediately surrounding this body, what is the things that this body goes through. But I don't really think that that's a complete understanding of the notion of life. To me, life is more like a net in which everything is connected to all of the other things, either directly or indirectly. So even the fact that we can live in the sense of having a body with vital signs is due to having to depend upon others. There's no situation in terms of our existence in which we sustain ourselves all by ourselves without depending upon others. So everything is interconnected, everything is connected to other things, and life doesn't mean just one's own biological existence. Life is the full picture of this interconnectedness. So although I don't have the answer to the question, what is the meaning of life, I think that the way that we investigate or the way that we find out is by looking into this situation of interconnectedness. So in short, I can't give the answer, but I do have an idea about how to get the answer. And how to get the answer would be to look further into the interdependence and interconnectedness that is the reality of all of us in terms of how we survive. Not taking a narrow perspective on what life is, but looking at the broader picture of the interconnectedness of all things. Question number 4?
We'll skip to number 5.
Skip number 5?
Yeah,
Okay.
where was 5?
Number 5
Number 5.
was the pink.
1, 2,
Yeah.
3, 4.
4 we'll
Why?
skip.
We're skipping 4. Okay, so this is the woman in the pink jacket.
So, Your Holiness, my question is about accumulated merit and also the first ignorance. About accumulated merit, my question is, it sounds like we have to have merit first, so then we know how to do the virtual things. But for people who lack of merit, so they even don't know how to start. It's kind of like poor people getting more poor, rich people getting more rich.
Right.
So for those poor people, how could they get out of this circle? What are the other key elements missing in this system? This is about accumulated merit. And about first ignorance, my question is, did Shakyamuni Buddha also used to have the first ignorance? If Buddha never have it, why we are originally Buddha, why we have it? And if Buddha never have it, how could we prove this path work for us? Thank you.
You're talking about innate ignorance from among innate and imaginary ignorance?
Yeah, the first ignorance, how we got stuck by this.
Or that you're talking about like the first moment of ignorance?
Yeah, if Buddha never has this first ignorance, why we have? And if Buddha never have, how could we prove the path he showed to us work for us also?
Okay. So jiwa dangbo di indicator la shugure pegator la. So the first question was about she feels that you have to have merit in order to perform virtuous actions, at least a little bit, because there are people in the world who it seems that they don't have any merit at all, so they don't even know what virtuous actions are.
Okay.
So therefore they can't even perform virtuous actions because they don't even know what they are and why it's good to practice them. So it seems that you need to have some merit first. And it's kind of like sometimes the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. So if you have merit, you can get more merit, but if you don't have merit, it's hard to get more merit. So what are the key things that sentient beings need to go from a state of having no merit to entering the path of accumulating merit? If you don't have any merit at all in the beginning, then how can you enter the path of accumulating merit? What's the key elements that are needed? That's the first question.
Yeah. Then.
And the second question.
Receive merit. 다 가지고 여러 사버리다. You have the answer. I'm angry. Something like that.
If I gave the answer, I would say, "Ta, ninja konga begimsen tere."
지당기 가수에 지 느려지죠. 지당도 니지 브라지 랑카. Disturb. Okay. The 지당기다 맛이 전다 밀류 토바삼 길와 밀류 토바 거란다 is sort of we have marriage right dendro지 right
맞아.
되니 유산에 밀류 토바 거란 가르쳐 온 거라서나 맞아 그렇지 marriage somewhere 저 사람 이해버지 청구가 봐
맞아.
다이네 사람 들려야지 유로에 따라서 변하지 밀류래 밀류 잠보 와서 밀류 잠다
나래
밀류 개버지 아니 밀류 또 밀류래 지금 잡는 방법이 뭐라 봐
맞아.
나바상게 봐 최신기질 과대 이제 대견 주주 참배 밀류를 붙이스 두산다 나바상게 봐 최신기질 상과를 이제서 걸 봐.
맞아.
땅 아주 남배 최중계에 대한 아주 된대 아마다야 돼.
맞아.
이제 대견 주주 상여다면 이제 된대 아마다. 다들 성기 위에 샤르 치겨래. 다들 인주산에 다디 it's sort of I think basically we all have the opportunity somewhere.
맞아.
opportunity the 없지. 고급도 없지. 근데 걔좀 처음 맞아서 면좀 걔좀만 좀.
맞아.
마도 가수에다 지 담배 취기 다 퇴야유다메 개외신이다 차유다메 사람 진짜다 겐좀 좀 드리직 토안을 마도 지다다 밀리지 톰니 손디 아주 랑도르치아 남주선 intelligent
맞아.
the moral sort of ethic
맞아.
드리치아 누바지 여러 그러잖아
맞아.
밀레바데 유엔에 손디 바지 여래 레바르 균 쇼메나 아니 바지 디 뉴바르디 상물로 야 여래 다들이 주산에 다디 지게 다 초사 마사 세네 마선 다 너는지 겐 좀마저지 겐 망보지 튠비 겐 망보지 좀바들래 아니 지 초사 바사르디 지 라면로
맞아.
사스도와 사사데 지 튠비 겐 망보지 준 좀바르 치아들이야 아니 초사사르 디지레도와 드린 주산에 튠비 겐을 지 좀야로 치아래
맞아.
근데 정말 잘 연구를 받아.
맞아.
다들 뭐 매주 쉐비나 아니지 균게 변지 라마 계획이니 년도 가버래. 안다는 디산 저번에 돌이야. 소수 도나 맞지를 마도 나머상게 비치 가르쳐다. 이 다양 대양 ignorance 여러 양들에 지 여러다. 다 렌트에 메시지 여러 다들 여러 사업시라리시. 이나 시제잖아 들으시지. 이나 쉽진 타와디 아니 상게 마도 수직이 신거 말을 라시한데 야슈.
맞아.
렌제 차신 타와디 수직이 신 말았어.
맞아.
네 인도스탄에 대신면도 대미네 시제 차나잖아. 튕기엔 처벌을 체제. 그냥 아주 이제 그냥 개개 지유여지 그래서 도나체 맞지래만 지단 용도 용으로 봐.
맞아.
튕기엔 좀 봐야요.
맞아.
시에마도 지금 초사스도 지 가서 겨왕만에 지 도부 이제 와서 아버지 잡러네 기세 겨와 다른데 영화서 이제 지대 영화
맞아.
소사사 디스카라 가면 다 지금 용도 연구를 받아 소남사야지 다 임비냐 인지민지 지금 드리지 키야메나 영화 매베 소리 드리지 돼 인지 말이지
요 말이스.
이거 초 양가사죠
나.
뭐라 사죠
맞아. 맞아. In the case of human beings, the very existence of someone in a human body is a sign that they have achieved or accumulated a significant amount of merit, because the human realm is located in the higher realms of samsara, the pleasant existences. So just to be born as a human is a sign that we have merit. However, there are various degrees in the Buddhist teachings of human birth. There's, you could say, the standard option, human birth, which is one that doesn't come with any further features other than the fact that it's human, or like you could say, just barely cross the line, human birth. Sorry, I'm.
말말 지난해 아주 깔래지 간다
Olaso, milutamo.
다 아주 토리 인사처럼
Lasso,
다 체리베 사이언스 가르쳐 evolution 셔봐
lasso,
evolution 셔 인도산에 미리 당부 든조래야 돼요
lao,
든조네 야야야 이게 진짜 셔봐
lasso.
오케이
The sunam yupe tak.
다 소놈 예배 제단 드린 교소에서 하면도 되신 거죠 시험도 다 든조 상모 드리자 참인도 와
Lasso,
배나 앱 말을
ape,
앱 지수 차도 말을 든조 상모 드리자 참인도 와 그래서 앱 소놈 14면도
lasso,
다 드리지 라야 하시는 거 같아
lasso. So there's various degrees of human birth. You know, there's just like you could be just barely human, or you could have a human birth that's special in some way, or you could have what the Buddhist teachings refer to as a precious human birth, where you have a wealth of opportunities to hear the Dharma, meet with spiritual teachers, you have excellent faculties of intelligence and things like this. And then from the scientific perspective, the scientific teaching on evolution points to some kind of evolution from animals to humans. But not all animals become humans. Only a certain type of animals evolved into humans. So maybe apes had more merit than other animals because they evolved into humans. But that's a little bit beside the point. But basically, in order to be human, it's already a sign that you have merit. Now, it's said that if you have the opportunity to hear the Dharma and meet with spiritual friends, spiritual teachers, then you possess what's known as a precious human birth. However, just the fact that we're all here together doesn't mean that we necessarily possess a precious human birth. We can't conclude 100%, but we operate on the assumption that all of us have achieved a precious human birth. But basically, the accumulation of merit is essentially whether or not positive conditions come together or not. When positive conditions come together, then we can accumulate merit. When they don't come together, then we do not accumulate merit. So the fact that we have heard the sound of the Dharma, the fact that we have met with spiritual teachers, is a sign that positive conditions have come together for us. And by the very virtue of having a human body, we already have a basic intelligence that goes along with that, and the moral capability of distinguishing right actions from destructive actions. If we don't have a serious kind of mental problem, then all human beings possess these basic abilities. And so it's possible for beings to bring positive conditions together whereby they can further engage in virtue. I don't think it's the case that anyone is completely cut off from the opportunity to bring positive conditions together. I think if anyone applies effort to bring positive conditions together, such as the positive conditions that will lead to us meeting a spiritual teacher, then they can do that. The possibility is there for them to do that. But when you get to the finite details of it, in terms of the workings of karma on a very detailed and subtle level, then it's said that only perfectly enlightened Buddhas, completely perfect Buddhas, know that no one else can know the subtle workings of karma in terms of how that process of merit and karma plays out step by step. That's something that only the Buddhas can know. So therefore, I can't say anything about it in terms of the very subtle level of how it actually plays out.
Oh, okay. Next one.
Then the second question was, did the Buddha have ignorance in the beginning? And if the Buddha did not have ignorance in the beginning, then there was more. But that was the first part of the question.
The Buddha ignorance 이렇게 말봐. 상기 코란.
코란기 미트. ngama lao. 코란 kepe kapsu.
네. 다 로발람지 내가 수수기위 내가 수 유스 그러봐.
라서.
람로 로바시미 내가다. 아니 수수기위 내가도 여러 봐.
라서.
아니 가르쳤어.
Tene di chandak samma tanda nepasoson karisena. Oh, English. Well, if the Buddha did not have ignorance in the beginning, then how could we achieve Buddhahood because we have ignorance? Right? Uh-huh.
And
This is
if Buddha never be caught up by first ignorance, why we originally also as Buddha, why we be caught up, and also if Buddha never have, how could we prove that the path he showed to us also worked for us? Because if he didn't have the same experience as us.
How could we prove that the past would work for us?
The path.
The path.
We prove that the path.
Path would work for us. Tene sangye di marikpa mesong mena. Tene lamgi tene
jimba.
lamdi la tene debu tobya yoba kandres hago tupires. Like if the Buddha did not have ignorance, then how could we know that the path will work?
Yeah, I know so. 로발람지 내가 수수기위 내가 유스.
Right.
그 그런 유직 그러봐.
Lao.
유집은 인주사나 그 experience 그 용거로 봐.
Lao.
지다 미직도 말도 유직으로 봐.
Lao.
드니 두산에
미치고 말해.
미리 지고 말하거든. 가가르지. 개와 가르지 봐.
나.
다들 미지고 다들 깔아가는데 유시.
나서.
something sonder인데 유지 버리지 봐. 개와 가지 가시 탐사 두두용 거래 탐사. 드니 두산 엄마 담불로 봐람 이내 다 수수 기회 내가 예배체.
나서.
근데 그 리베리베지 남장 두산은 클릭클릭지 가수지. 가수에 팀업에 반제 팀업이 봐.
나서.
서브 친제 좀으로서 남정으로.
나.
네 두산 코란 experience 여봐. 부다를 여러서 만다. 부다 귀지부터 용.
나서. Well, it's important to know that the person who became the Buddha started as an ordinary sentient being and went through a process on the path of applying himself to the path over a series of many lifetimes. And over the course of those lifetimes, he trained in the path to the point where his ignorance got weaker and weaker, less and less, until finally he became the Buddha. So if you ask the question, does the Buddha have ignorance? The answer is no. The Buddha himself, at the state of the result, does not have ignorance. But the Buddha wasn't always a Buddha. The Buddha went through stages of being an ordinary sentient
Buddha
being.
is always Buddha, but Buddha is always Buddha.
Okay. But Lamla,
Past life, maybe.
oh, lasso.
Yeah.
But Lamla, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can kind of like retroactively apply the label of Buddha to all of the Buddha's past lives and say that was the Buddha. But at the stage of the path, then at the stage of the Buddha applying himself to the path, then he had ignorance that he reduced, and that's why he became the Buddha, through applying himself to the path.
Okay. 다 바지 내려 지미자. 다 담아들 양해지 시나. 다 좋아디 들어서 지미자.
맞아?
다 맛이 더 선이 숍에 가수에다 상황이 부다 가서 젠디 박스 가서
Buddha Jayanti Park.
젠디 박.
맞아?
내가 상황이 고래서도 다 상황을 가고 여러 번 재밌어 처럼 고 여러 번
맞아?
냠내 제고요 말 처럼 고 여러 번
라.
냠내 제마 제게 좀 해야지 다고 처럼 고 여러 번 내가
맞아?
내 뉴스안에 지단 좀 dinner 왕지에 유서 말해 냠내 제모 처럼 참여하지
맞아? 맞아?
다이네 지금 유연동도 자적으로다
맞아?
다이네 선이 상황이 꾸야요 아래 그 공다디 밀레리베 가서 밀레리 말다가 주숨게베 응구루요가
맞아?
부지야 나도 이제 좀 좋아해
맞아?
제자다 다리링에 이렇게 시작이 드린 조주의 인사 안 담아들이야 치카시지 예 쉬어요
맞아?
와우
Seems the question period is over now. So I'd like to make a few remarks in conclusion. Tomorrow, the schedule is that we will have a...
tomorrow morning
Yes, tomorrow morning, okay? Oh,
oh
I'm dealing with an activist editor. Tomorrow morning, there will be a long life empowerment offered in Buddha Jayanti Park. And the notion of a long life empowerment is interesting. Everyone likes the idea of long life. There hasn't been so much expression about a desire to practice, but everyone wants to receive an empowerment for long life. And I don't know if it's even possible for your life to become longer just by receiving an empowerment without practicing. But in any case, we'll pretend that it is possible. And the long life empowerment will be offered. And then tomorrow afternoon, we will practice the Guru Yoga Puja for Tusum Kempa. And therefore, since those activities will consume our time tomorrow, today is basically the last day on which I'll make extensive remarks. And therefore, at the conclusion of today's session, I wanted to say a few more words.
I think time's already passed. So we are in India. I think it's okay. 다가서 들려야 대 지금 다 남아상게 취해야 엔 자간에 뒤로 다 들이사면다 배 나눠려야 다 당방엔도 슬라움다 다배 간생 종리야 아니 지금 너를 코랑 가시면지 남배 취 마다를 공려야 아니 범배 취해야 요아래 범배 취해 다 그래
라서
다들 뭐지 상숑이 주 다르면
장초.
말아 상숑사 롱바지 알아
상숑 라서.
드니 주 다르
라서.
딩에는 다 가르쳐 주잖아 야지 배게 지가서 그 되매기 지가 출루를 이제 영어만 출루 사도 영어 말아 봐 워치
라.
드니 영어를 받아
라서.
딱 본부마다 그런 가르쳐 다들 좋게 시하면 딱 간다 디젤이야 아니 자나네 아니 가서 조샤게문이 꾸니 된듯이 쉬버려 봐
라서 꾸니.
두렵 좀 밖에 배나 안 디듀사는 야나네 아니 지나바상게 외치 별이야 갈아간섬 다리에 그래 다이네 做切学的 다다버도 내대하게 나바상게 외치되 저도 야가르네 두렵게 듬바도 예배 나눠려야 야가르 주 규브래
라서.
드리두산다 대가르 규브래 다나시 대zam도 마세베 에너지 야가르기 그러니까 땡규르티서 베게 털려야 규르체 배바스기 딱 대베 털네 에너지 나바상게 외쳐야 롬녀체하기 고급 현대 민족아지 충분히 말했어
라서.
근데 지 딱 배가 나바상게 템바들이야 템베 님구르고 팅카시 총지
라서.
그래도 들지 템방 아다르 치다르자 근데 용 망보지 용한테 야래 다 템바 치다르기 거스이나 아니 이제 매체제 다 팅상 지 가서 사자 거유 길로 사르고 다들 그 상황을 템바 치다르기 거스 충분히 말해 아니 거유대 템바 치다르기 거스 충분히 말해 제자다 거유대 당연 도스 바질라시나
라서. 테니 두랍 듬바게 바나나 야나네 꾸니 된된 슈버레.
그래서 줄라한 그 조샤게만 군이 된듯이
라서. 조어기 꾸니. 샤케투바.
폼잖아
라서. 샤케투바기 꾸니. 라서. 테니 찍 꾸테니 기낭네 찍데.
말면 계속 니가요 지금 다시 저 자모체야 맞지 줄라하나 오코르죠 추초 니 추초 니
라서. 니가 하사네.
지금 디스케라 좀 차소라
라서. So in conclusion, I wanted to say that in terms of the journey that the Buddha Dharma has taken through the years, actually in the snowy land of Tibet, the spiritual tradition that held sway before the time of the Buddha Dharma in ancient times was the Pen tradition of spirituality. That was the dominant spiritual tradition. And that tradition was imported from the region of Shangshung. And then around the 7th or 8th centuries, 2 statues of the Buddha were brought to Tibet from China. And this included the famous Chō statue in Lhasa. But the real stable roots of the Buddha Dharma, in terms of the roots of Buddha Dharma that grew in a stable way through the years were planted as a result of transmission of the Buddhist teachings from India. And so the teachings that were brought to Tibet from India were the ones that remained for hundreds of years in a very stable way and were transmitted directly from masters to disciples through the ages. And a unique feature of this process of transmission was that a very extensive amount of Buddhist teachings in letter was translated from Indian languages into Tibetan. The words of the Buddha, as well as the commentarial treatises of many Indian panditas, all of these were translated into Tibetan, thus creating a very unique opportunity for Tibetan people over a period of hundreds of years to engage the Buddhist teachings in a way that was in a way in which the favorable conditions for them to do so were very strong because of this great amount of words of the teachings that were translated into Tibetan. So, as many of you may know, this process of transmission of the Buddhist teachings to India took place over several stages, and there were times when the Buddhist teachings in Tibet underwent periods of decline. And due to this, there are two main eras of transmission of Buddhism in Tibet that are identified. This was the early dissemination period and the later dissemination period. And so the early dissemination period formed the basis, the teachings that were brought to Tibet in the early dissemination period formed the basis of the Nyingma lineage. And then the later dissemination formed the basis of all of the teachings of the Sakya tradition, the Kagyu tradition, and the Gelug tradition. So in terms of the teachings of the Kagyu tradition itself, these mostly come from the teachings of the later propagation of the teachings or the later translation period.
다 간다 뒤 다대봐도 아주 같은 요 컨디션라베냐 뒤 우들이야 아니 야가르게도 되네 벽에도 체체 아니 가서 게니 용디야래 다 야가게도라고 해줘서 가라서 아주 최근과의 야가를 투입이지다 야가는 수 아니 남아상교 최 충분히면디 아니 민남기 셈라 아니 양의 양도 왜 샤체도 아니 로저디즈 야가르게도 사정 거를 샤이메레
라서
the Hindustani azu kadüine the Tibetans feeling somewhat that the assembly 초심 시다야래
라서
아주 지 최근 거다 디더 치매기 지 로셀랑과 땡겐기 에네다 담배 최상부디 엔 야가는 추종이지
라서
the Hindustani 가르쳐야지 야가르디 아주 가르쳐야지 타르벨 남을 내 튕긴기 가르쳐야지 니치 캔도 지다 다나싱 아주 지 최대의 중중에 상부질량 지 쇼디 야르스
라서
안 나바도 아주 그 규벌의 참임이나 네 가장 쉬운지 그 규벌사한테 지당다 별에 추규 막고 싶지 않아요 추규디 천대 망체 공부 민족하다 아니 사실 민족하다这个团呢参讨去그 규디야都是미세르 제제 고랑 규배团参讨去유바 고랑 돈에는 그 유바세지 센터버리지 유바 고랑 돈에 센터가 준진데 소도지 그 유비 전된 차로데 냠낸 치력이 유바
맞아
디 제된체 다 냠낸체 라마 코먼츠 당화 때마다 로마츠 냠낸체 아니 냠낸디 가서 냠낸체는 유를 깨게 봐도 곰 유를 깨게 봐도 곰는데 유를 끼신게 당화다 명아도야 로마 신달이야마 낭체 단도나지 twingi gyuba sanan jando nyamlengi gyuba sanan jando ane dendeji zanduen rubi nang yue bin ta chitang sina sangol de nang yore ta ina ge gyuba grang de ji zanduen rubi de nang yue bin du sane ane ge gyuba s taw yi mja ta gan da ya yagar ge chujen chue ane tu gyu be togba di ane parma chi be gan jing zhong li ne ya 다 대창부 세네 장도 아니 모두 균진 chen 뒤 다대 봐도 지 농어 자사만 비중이야 담바 공무체 진짜지 진진 나요레스
That's all.
근데 이제 가장 니만 담바도 쉬변난신 대저에 지 가서 유바 유배 최마야와 유바배 다 메지마서 15만 이베지 유바 sombr로 내대바데 양가 아니 야스린디 토리아 양가르지 내수 진경배좀 차다 다나지 들이 유바되던 제베 제거로든데 배아 총부디 땅아주 지당기 배 남아상기 참여기 가서 시지를 지다 나와도 그 유베트 시지를 지르지려야 뭔지 쇼쇼를 했습니다.
That's all. So the teachings have survived all of these hundreds of years until the present. And in terms of all of the great Tibetan texts that were used to carry these teachings, all of them begin with the name of the title of the text in the language of India, or in the language, literally it says, in the language of India, and then the Sanskrit title of the text is given, and then it finally gives the title of the text as translated into Tibetan. And this was always done at the beginning of great texts for the purpose of reminding people that India is the land of the origin of the Buddha Dharma. These teachings originated through the Buddha and the Indian masters who practiced the Buddha's teachings. And so this path, this noble path of Buddhism that guides sentient beings to liberation, originated in India, and therefore we, in the Tibetan tradition, we always remember this again and again. We consider India in this way to be a great source of Dharma and of culture. And this appreciation is especially strong within the Kagyu lineage of Tibetan Buddhism. In general, most lineages take their names from the names of monasteries or the names of places, but the Kagyu lineage has a special origin to its name. The name of the Kagyu lineage is given based upon the style of its transmission. The style of transmission in the Kagyu lineage is that realization and experience are accomplished through practice, so that when gurus give spiritual instructions, the disciples meditate upon those instructions until their meaning has fully and completely arisen in their mind stream. And once it has fully and completely arisen in their mind stream, those disciples in turn become teachers and propagate those teachings to others. And so this is why the Kagyu lineage is known as a true lineage of experience and realization, not just a lineage of words. So in general, this method of transmission where true experience and realization is gained in one's mind stream, and then through that one passes the teachings down to the next generation of students, that's really a practice that is present in all of the lineages of Tibetan Buddhism. But the Kagyu lineage places special emphasis on this style of transmission and really carries this style of transmission as a hallmark of its identity as a lineage of the Dharma. And so that really signifies the special relationship that the Kagyu lineage in particular has with the noble land of India, because it is through this style of person-to-person transmission that the teachings were held through the ages and through the centuries of India and then through the centuries of Tibet. And they were held by very earnestly cherishing them. And through this, masters through the centuries have been able to hold, sustain, and propagate these teachings and keep them alive and fresh. And one of the main reasons why the teachings have been able to be kept alive and fresh to the present day is because the teachings have once again returned to the noble land of India from Tibet. And I think that the followers of the Kagyu lineage in particular can be especially proud of this fact. It's a very dignified and marvelous adornment to our lineage.
Tandona, ji Karmapa Gunji, da Kanda Karmabe, reincarnation, recognizing reincarnation, Jube Gunji Chage, Sir Dene, Tadabado, and the Gawa Tome Pardo, Simjengi, Jendungi Chedo, and Yana Yando, Jitin the Pene, Zava, Tomato Yare, Tandone, and the Kashu. The Karmapa Chen Shene, the Karmapa Chen Shene, Jordan, Kashu. Karmapa Chen Shene, Jordan, until the limitation of the US cigarettes on those. But could you imagine the Yiminia, Koranga Chidang, and Jovet to Chadele, limitation came every. The Mutuinity, Kashu. Pajita, Simjan, Giton, Simja Tamji Giton, Mandrugiba, Decido, and a Zitendo Yana and the Page and Drove Twins Giare. The Hindustan that come up with sense. The Shebata Masheba, Debameva, Tandonaji, Shendun Chadi, Nanke, Tattoo paper, and Shendun Nangade, some that nine Bakra Shaggy Shay or Kellen Chay or the Hindustan, but the window. That Tamatalia, Kamabe, Korang Miseg in Zavachile, Nandan style, some of the Nandan with the Nepes to Jews at Tinalon energy, Cho Tamje to Penny, Cho Casenza Peche, energy, Dushachuri maybe turns out. Madobe energy, the Kamapa, the energy Karshwaji, Pebajibo, La Tade, so Yanaji. Lumba Kashi Tade of Maimbache, Gamabin Zirinde, and a Giri Mijiba, Mirig Mijiba, Rishun Mijiba, Tumen Nalolia, and a Pankashwaji, and Pech, Casins and Pech, and Javanance, and the Directone, and a Chome Remake, and Zirimbeade, Gamabeji, Chile, Bedan of Jitan, Korangi, Gombashedan of the Tinizima Dando, that the nearest Gomadati, Pejana, the Resha. The Hindustan, Susu, when a minia, Tendage droop to Yachi, Ravachi, that is Calais. The Imina Mambaya, the droop to Ravachi. In a Zoti, near Tana Shabe Shubanasi, the Sangi Chile Drunken, that come up with Senandado, Sangi Chile Drunken Senandado, that the Michi Mare, did Azuchi, Samolo Chetuaji down. Samololia, the Kokab Yavici, in Hindustan, and a council then some Sameg and Eminia, Tariki, and the Gamabe Guye to Jendi, the Dunche, Sameg and Mambalia, and a Jaine, the Gamaba, that Niba Sumba Shivanga Harchana, Chikchava Chese, and the Simjek and the Drubi in some of the Nijiki, Simjer of Kurtuati, Kurguati, Kachamares, Sinaka Shas came into. And the Tuzu Chivachatas. I'm sorry.
Rangi Karmapa Sumba Shiba. As we know, the first Karmapa, Tusum Kempa, was the one who. Ring Draxel? Can you hear me now? Okay. Was the one who initiated the tradition of recognizing reincarnations of masters. And starting with Dusum Khenpa, the holders of the Karmapa lineage have shown a wide variety of enlightened activities to benefit sentient beings. They took on the title of the Karmapa as a method of benefiting sentient beings. And if you consider the history of the Karmapas, you can perhaps say that there is a limit to the enlightened activity of the Karmapas in terms of their accomplishing the benefit of others. But actually there is no limit to the enlightened activity of the Karmapas, because the Karmapas have taken on a vow and made a promise to work for the benefit of sentient beings, to perform activity that benefits sentient beings until samsara has been emptied, until there are no more sentient beings who are suffering. And they have taken on this promise regardless of whether beings know the name Karmapa or not. They will continue to perform benefit for others. And the way in which the holders of the title Karmapa have done this, in particular, in terms of their own unique style, is that they go from place to place. They go to various lands, various regions, in order to connect with students and sentient beings to be benefited. And they do this in a way that is free from bias. They don't display any bias toward any one particular type of people, such as having the thought that they would only benefit Tibetans. They don't hold any bias with regard to geography, not preferring any one region over another. And they don't hold any bias towards any particular tradition or way of doing things, but they go wherever is needed and connect with whatever type of people there are who are in need in order to benefit them, free of bias, free of partiality. Now, this is what the texts say. I'm not saying this about myself as a holder of the title Karmapa, but this is what the texts say about the holders of the title Karmapa. Now, in terms of my role in this, actualizing the noble aspirations of the Gyalwang Karmapa can sometimes be a little bit difficult, but I hold to the hope and the wish that in the future I will be able to continue this activity of attempting to benefit sentient beings. And so, as I said before, the main role of the Karmapa is to perform all of the activities of the Buddhas of the 3 times. And I mentioned before that when you really consider the meaning of this, then this doesn't apply just to one person. It applies to all of us. And we all have the opportunity to benefit sentient beings in this way. Tene tarung Karmapa nipa sambashipati kawa yapo lentu masa. Okay. Lasso. Oh, lasso. Tene digi gune pento. Lasso shendun. Ini zo di shendun drup tupe melam jangyak di kache sheres. Lasso. So we all have the opportunity to serve other sentient beings, to bring benefit to other sentient beings, and maybe in the future we'll have the opportunity to be the 2nd Karmapa or the 3rd Karmapa or the 4th Karmapa or what have you. But the main thing is to hold to the aspiration that we can be of benefit to the world and expand our commitment to be of help to other sentient beings. And I think it's important to keep it in mind that that's the very reason why we're holding this commemoration festival.